government agency is not valid. But Gary, you're saying that's not true because this agency actually takes in city funds.
Well, it's more than just that. This agency was incorporated by the city of New York, by the mayor's office. The mayor appoints the board of directors. 3 sitting city commissioners sit on the board of directors, and 99% of their funding is tax money. Now, if that's not a city agency, I don't know what is. We're only trying to see their records for the purposes of verifying the numbers that they're publishing, because we're alleging that the numbers they're publishing are inflated, are basically incorrect. And even the health commissioner herself, who sits on the board, has admitted that the numbers are unverifiable.
Right. We understand that the city council actually had to postpone their investigation of the agency because the agency would not give any of its numbers.
Traditionally, the health department's been uncooperative with giving out information. I mean, it's our tax money, it's our city government, and yet our government doesn't want us to know what they're doing. They want to operate this shelter behind me, behind closed doors. And even a city council member has characterized this center as a little animal Auschwitz, because 80% of the animals that come into this shelter don't come out alive.
And Gary, real quick before we wrap up here, I understand that you are trying to get a petition here on the November ballot.
Yes, we're going to be collecting signatures to get a voter initiative on the November election to form a Department of Animal Affairs, to take the animal control and animal welfare and shelter system away from the health department. The health department is not in the business of protecting animals. They're in the business of protecting people from animals.
Okay.
It's the wrong agency to be doing this work.
Okay, Gary, Sarah, thanks so much for coming out here, and also thanks for bringing Jack out. Lynn, back to you.
And it could mean big problems for the animals involved. Ernabelle DeMillo is live with the story. Ernabelle, what's happening?
Well, good morning, Robin. As you know, we've been following the situation at the animal shelter, the city's animal shelter, for almost a year now, the Center for Animal Care and Control. And last year, the executive director of the shelter, Marilyn Haggerty Blum, said that they were trying to work on their volunteer program. Well, it's 1 year later, and still, what's going on? What's happening? Well, joining me this morning is Gary Kaskel. He is with the Shelter Reform Action Committee to give us an update. Gary, first of all, what's going to take place here at 8:30?
Well, there's going to be a demonstration by people who are volunteers, trained at other facilities, who've come here to try and volunteer and have been turned away. Unbelievably, this shelter turns away help when it is severely understaffed and underfunded. And the reason that we believe they're being turned away is because the management of this shelter sees volunteers as future whistleblowers.
As a threat to the shelter?
Well, volunteers went public a year and a half ago about the dismal conditions inside, and then they were all fired. They were never rehired, and they were never replaced.
Now, we did talk to a spokesperson with this AACC, and they did tell us that there are currently 40 volunteers in their system. And Kyle Burkhart, here's what a part of the statement he sent in Good Day New York. At CACC, we are aware of the value and importance of a well-trained and well-supervised volunteer workforce. However, before a deeper pool of volunteers can be fully and effectively utilized, the thorough training of CACC employees must be first completed. Your response to that statement?
It's just a bold-faced lie. I mean, they said that a year ago. They don't want volunteers in here because the Giuliani-style management believes that they can control the information coming out of this shelter by controlling who's inside. And it's just obvious that any animal shelter must have volunteers to augment the staff. In this particular case, they're severely understaffed. The HSUS just came out with a report in June describing how understaffed they were, and yet they don't use volunteers to augment. These animals are languishing in cages. Dogs are not getting walked. They admit that dogs are not getting walked. It's against the humane laws of the state of New York. It's against the violation of the contract with the city. And it is just indescribably inhumane to allow these animals to languish without having human contact and being exercised and walked.
Okay, Gary Kaskel with the Shelter Reform Action Committee. He will be here along with Molly, his dog, and other volunteers protesting in front of the shelter at 8:30. That happens again at 8:30 this morning. Okay, Robin, back to you in the studio.
Animal Care and Control, the city shelter, with a sign that says, "Save a life, adopt a shelter pet," killed Tashawn and Lamar's dog on the day she was supposed to pick him up. Shelter officials say it was a clerical error.
This accident would not have occurred if the computerized record-keeping system that was promised over 2 years ago were implemented and in place.
Gary Kaskel heads up a shelter reform committee. Kaskel faults the city for running a shelter that he feels is antiquated and underfunded.
40,000 animals, more than 40,000 animals were killed last year after year, and the city just treats it like another carting operation. Pick them up and dispose them.
Kaskel wants changes.
I'm Tim Minton with exclusive new allegations against New York's animal shelter system.
They have failed in their mission in almost every category that's possible to fail in.
Shelter Reform Committee founder and CACC critic Gary Kaskel says the system's record of 40,000 dead animals a year speaks for itself.
There are people that feel that to solve the animal overpopulation problem, you have to kill a lot of animals to thin the herd. And that's the mentality that goes on at the CACC.
While nearly 70% of them will be put down. Today, outside City Hall, animal rights activists said this confirms what they've been saying for at least 6 years. And as Mayor Bloomberg walked by, they demanded answers.
We're calling for the mayor to replace the entire board, and we're calling for the mayor to replace the executive director with a qualified, humane professional.
Gary Kaskel is an animal rights activist who's been working to make things better in the city's animal shelters. But he thinks a new bill, quietly signed into law by the mayor this week, will do anything but that. The law cuts the shelter's hours of operation in half to save money.
We're troubled by the law in that a 12-hour shelter day leaves 12 hours in which animals could be hit by cars or injured in the streets, and there would be basically nowhere to take them.
For years, the CACC, the largest shelter system in the nation, has faced criticism from organizations not satisfied with the euthanasia rate.
They have a horrible record. In 5 years, the budget for this organization practically doubled, and yet the euthanasia rate remains flat. That doesn't bode well for the management style of this executive director.
Gary Kaskel, co-chair of the Shelter Reform Action Committee, sees this recent firing as good news.
This is something that we have been looking forward to for several years. We have been asking the city to replace the management and put in an experienced, humane professional.
Despite several attempts, we were unable to reach Haggerty Bloom for comment.
Richard Dolbeer and Richard Shipman of the U.S. Department of Agriculture say it's the hundreds of geese on Rikers Island that pose a threat to the millions of airline passengers. The Port Authority asked the USDA for a goose management program. They put it in place today, rounding up more than 400 of the long-necked fowl for slaughter. But animal rights activists say the USDA is going to extremes.
The United States Department of Agriculture was given a non-lethal solution to this a year ago. They didn't pursue that. They allowed the goose population to increase, and now they're taking drastic measures to abate it.
I'm a professional biologist and I love birds, but I think they need to understand the seriousness of this issue.
We don't want to put airport passengers in jeopardy. All we're saying is that there's a non-lethal solution and a lethal solution.
To eliminate the geese on Rikers Island by killing them is a Band-Aid fix. It doesn't solve the problem, and it's inhumane.
Gary Kaskel and his group United Action for Animals says non-lethal solutions to the problem should be given a closer look.